Hi! This time I wanted to give you an update of the things that, how things are going to proceed with my channel. And I also wanted to make a sort of video response to CondorDM. I discovered his channel a couple of weeks ago, more or less, and I think it's worth watching. I am going to respond to a video that is quite interesting, featuring the attachment that we sometimes develop towards our characters, especially when they die in role-playing games. Well, let's start with the update. The other time I was talking with one of my viewers, Midnight Green, and I mentioned that I wish I had a better. I was more skilled when it comes to time administration. But I think I have made some changes so that I have managed to upload more videos per week. So I hope I'll be able to keep that up because there are so many things I want to talk about concerning role playing games. Right now, I am finishing the next part of my Neon Lords of the Toxic Wasteland review. I'm going to talk about three character classes that could be considered like the full-time spellcasters of the game. So I am going to keep on with the other parts of my reviews, and I also wanted to start my review featuring the solo adventuring toolkit because, well, thanks to two of my viewers, Droid Life and Michael C. They commented how maybe I should bring out a complete review and give some tips on how to use the toolkit. So I am going to create a review slash guide on how to use the toolkit. So I'm going to start with that as soon as I get the chance. I think that's about it when it comes to the update. Now let's go to the video response. I'm going to put a link in the description to CondorDM's video, so I recommend that you watch it first. But that video made me think of several things concerning how we become attached to our characters in role-playing games. I think I experienced that firsthand in my introduction to the hobby when I played role-playing games for the first time as a ranger in Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. I got killed immediately in the first encounter. And it felt, it felt jarring because it was my first character and I was very excited to play the game, and the encounter ended quite abruptly. But I immediately developed that hunger for more. I thought, I want to play again, I want to create a new character, and I want to see if things turn out differently. If there is something that I can do to change the fate of my player character. So to me, that first death was pretty exciting because I wanted to play again. I think there is a healthy attachment and an unhealthy one. If you are still aware that it's a role-playing game, that it's still a game, you can feel attached to your character as if you feel attached to your favorite an object. Maybe you have like a favorite, who knows, like it could be anything, your favorite wallet. Oh, it's my lucky wallet because it brings money towards me or something. Or maybe you really like your car. Or in terms of role-playing games, you have your favorite miniature. Maybe you have a book that you really enjoy, not necessarily related to role-playing games. So sometimes you can become attached to objects, but they are still objects. So it should still be a healthy attachment in which there is nothing greater at stake. And when it comes to role-playing games, because you are leveling up your character, you are experiencing all of those adventures, saving the lives of the characters of the other players. Sometimes they rescue your character, so you develop that bond. And I think there is a way in which that becomes some sort of proof as to the strength of your own personality. That is, maybe in real life, there are also some situations in which you prove your emotional maturity, because when something really bad happens, you recover quite quickly, or you recover in a healthy way. So when your player character dies, I think that if you develop that bond, it is inevitable that you feel like it burns, like, oh no, my character, and I had killed all of those monsters, and that character had my favorite sword and all of that. But you need to let go. This applies to many things in life. It can become quite philosophical. I think that's the reason the video made by CondorDM got me thinking about different things, because it's somewhat of a philosophical thing. Not to that is to feel that attachment, to care about things, but at the same time going with the flow. So, for example, this can be seen in physical activities. Let's say a physical confrontation. If you get hit during a fight, you cannot become too attached to the pain. You feel the pain and you let it go. You need to let it flow. Don't get attached or obsessed with that. This could apply to many different things. You need to let that go sometimes. And that is where true strength lies, in my opinion. CondorDM talked a bit about that. He mentioned how there is strength in developing that attachment, because someone who is strong is able to feel and still keep on going, not get pulled into some sort of depression. So in the case in which you cannot detach yourself completely, or rather, if you do not handle that sense of loss in an effective way, you become stuck. So becoming jaded or insensitive or unattached is not always a sign of strength. I think there are some moments in which you have to do it. For example, when defeating an enemy, you cannot feel bad for that enemy. If you do that, you will create an opening. But in the case of role-playing games, when you become attached to a character, you suffer that character's death, and you keep on going, you keep on playing. That shows how strong you are. And oh, well, you take the hit and you keep on going. Sometimes it's not as simple. I remember it was several years back, perhaps more than 20 years ago, easily. There was this player. He was playing as a cleric. There were three characters in the group: a cleric, fighter, and thief. And he was constantly complaining about his cleric, and that he hated that character. He couldn't use sharp weapons. You know, the typical cleric can only use maces and warhammers, blunt weapons. So he was constantly complaining about that cleric. Eventually, the entire party entered this section of the dungeon where there was this pit. I think it was the third dungeon included in the box set of the Introduction to Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. I think that was the part. I think there is a room. Either there is a room there, or I created a room later on for that dungeon, where there is a pit trap, and there are kobolds? No. Gnolls. There are gnolls in that section. Some of them were armed with bows and arrows, obviously. So there was this pit, and there were kobolds, and this cleric tended to be a bit too hasty. He had a lot of Leroy Jenkins moments in which he just charged in. Instead of letting the fighter go in first, sometimes he became a bit too overzealous, because the cleric is sturdier when compared to, for example, the thief, but you usually want to let the fighter take care of the frontline business. But he saw the pit, and he saw all of those gnolls on the other side with their bows, And he was like, oh well, I'm going to climb down the pit, and I'm going to climb up the pit to the other side to attack the kobolds. It was quite the gnolls. So it was quite suicidal. And the other two players were like, no, don't do it, don't do it. And the cleric just did his own thing. He started to climb down, and the thief told the fighter, can you maybe you should go down with him. And he was like, no, I'm not crazy, I'm going to die if I do that. And the cleric just kept on going, because he said, don't worry, I have my few cure light wounds spells. So he started to take hits from the arrows. The gnolls started to shoot down the pit, and he got hit. And when he used his cure light wounds, he only managed to cure like 1 or 2 hit points, and suddenly he realized that it was a terrible idea. So he started to try to climb back, but it was too late. He got killed. The gnolls started to go after the other two player characters. They decided to run away. They didn't have a chance to retrieve or recover the corpse. They had to leave that corpse there. They couldn't resurrect him, and the player became really gloomy, like very sad because of the death of his cleric. But like I said, that player was constantly saying that his cleric sucked, and that he was a terrible player character, that he didn't like the class. But when the cleric died, he kind of like experienced that loss, like he actually really cared about that cleric, and he became very regretful that he was not more cautious or careful. This also reminds me of another sort of situation. During one of the few conventions that happen, there aren't too many gaming conventions here, and I met a few people from Chihuahua. So they told me if I could introduce them to a more old school, or vieja escuela as we call it in Mexico, style of gaming. They only had experience with Fate. And as you know, Fate and old school, they are completely different. The Fate system is completely focused on storytelling, mostly. There are some, depending on how you run the game, there could be death and some risks and all of that, but there are some mechanisms to save you from making too many wrong choices. So I decided to run Dungeon Crawl Classics for them, the module The Witch of Wydfield. I have reviewed that module. I'm going to put the link in the description to my old review of it. It's a really fun module. It's one of my favorite funnels for Dungeon Crawl Classics. To avoid spoilers, there is a section in that adventure where you're getting attacked, but you are not exactly sure how. Let's put it like that. You're getting attacked, but you are not exactly sure where the attacks are coming from. So the players reach that area, and of the 3 players, only 1 player had that, how would you say, understanding of the old school style. He started to do all sorts of things. It was, I don't want to give out the area in case there are spoilers, how would you say. There was this area with certain elements that you can use to make it harder for the enemy to hit you. So he started to use the environment, the objects in that area, so that his characters would survive. He only lost 1 character of his 4 characters, but the others, they were completely at a loss as to what to do. They were so used to the way of Fate of running things. And this is not a criticism of Fate. I like some Fate-based games like Oubliette, but depending on the game master, sometimes it feels like there are training wheels, like there is no risk or danger involved. So those players had their entire groups decimated. They had like 2 or just 1 player character surviving, but the other player, he was quite intelligent, managed to defeat that enemy. It was actually thanks to him that they survived the encounter. I really love that model. I played it 5 times. It's always really fun. So in that case, well, they took it pretty bad. The loss, the characters, the players, they were quite sad because before we began, I forgot to mention this, before we began, they started to create these really involved backstories to their player characters. And I was telling them, don't put too much detail when it comes to the background of your player characters, because it's quite likely that half of them, they may end up dying during the adventure. This is a funnel. It is expected that usually the weaker characters are going to die, and they were like, no, it's okay, we are going to survive, and all of that. But they got a bit like a shock, their first experience with old school gaming. I don't know if they kept playing after that. The player that survived, he was so, like, how would you say, overjoyed that he played so well. So I think that player continued later on. I didn't keep track of what they did after that. But that's another example. Oftentimes that attachment is also strongly linked not only to the experiences, but when you come to the realization of risk. I think that's a great thing of role-playing games that involve death. They really make you appreciate the life of the player characters. Now that I think of it, that I think about it, all of my player characters, that is the times I have played as a player character, they have all suffered a glorious death. I never had a character retiring. They have always died during an adventure. But I treasure all of them. It's like in many sagas, many brave stories of those incredible warriors in mythology, or sometimes even in history. They suffer, yes, some deaths, sometimes some terrible deaths, but that does not erase all of the things that they accomplished. So yes, overall, I think the topic, the subject is quite interesting, and there are many things you could talk about it, probably, but just talking about the ideas that came to my mind immediately, those are it. So I highly recommend that you check out the video by CondorDM, that you check out his channel. I think it is important to find those valuable channels, I would say, because sometimes I have noticed throughout the years, especially in current times, that many quality channels start to disappear. Either they start to get harassed because their ideas or their politics, they do not match the current trends. Sometimes the owners of those channels, they become very depressed and they end up deleting their channels. But when you find valuable channels, and I think the CondorDM is a channel worth looking at, worth taking a look. Yes, I think that they are really valuable, and I hope many other role players start to bring out their content. In my the main section of my channel, I have some recommended channels there. You may want to check them out. They are those that I consider to be that they have good content. So yes, well, I hope you found this update entertaining. Thanks to the CondorDM for proposing that, well, not proposing, that bringing out that video. I think it was, like I said, a subject that requires some exploration or meditation, if you would call it like that. It's food for thought. So thank you for watching, and thank you to those that have been supporting the channel by sending drive-through RPG gift certificates. If anyone else wants to further support the channel, the information on how to do that will be in the description below. Once again, thank you, and I will try to hurry up with my next part of the Neon Lords of the Toxic Wasteland. See you later.